Many residents of this scheme that houses about 300 families point out that they have not received any financial or material aid. Police officers who arrived at the location held discussions with the protesters.
අපිට මෙතන මාස්ටර් ටෙන්ඩර් කිට් වෙනවා. අපිට කිසිම දෙයක් කාන්දුවෙන්වත් අපිට කවුරුත්වත් ඇවිල්ලා බැලුවා නැහැ. අපි අල්ලපගෙන ගිහලා මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ඉල්ලන්නත් බෑ අපිට. අපි ඒගොල්ලන් කරන දවසක් දෙයි. ඊළඟ දවසේ කවුද දෙන්න අපිට? අපිට පාරට බයින්නත් එපා කියනවා. දෙන්නකොට ඔක්කොමට එක විදියට නෙන්න. කියන්නේ අපි කියන්නේ ඒක තමයි. ඒකට එළියට යන්නත් බෑ. කණ්ඩ බොණ්ඩත් නැහැ. එතකොට ඒගොල්ලෝ මොනවද කරන්නේ? අපේ සහෝදරනේ ඉන්නේ ඔක්කොම. වෙන දෙයක් අපිට ලැබෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒ මොකද නෑ. එන්න එපා. එළියට එන්න එපා. එළියට එන්න එපා කියලා ඇතුළෙම ගියාගෙන ඉන්නවා.
The group dispersed after the police assured them that financial or material aid would be provided to them. Meanwhile, a group of residents in Dematagwada was provided with a 5,000 rupee concession by state officials. Our correspondent pointed out that affiliated families voiced their objection over the fact that they were not provided with this concession.
මේ භාගයක් දුර මිනිස්සුන්ට දීලා ඉවරලා කියනවා පවුලේ භූමූලිකයට විතරයිලු දෙන්නේ එක ගේකට පවුල් 10ක් විතර ජීවත් වෙන මිනිස්සුත් ඉන්නවා ඒ පවුල් 10ටම සල්ලි දෙන්න ඕනේ රට දවස් 10ක් ලොක් කරලා රුපියල් 5000 මිනිහෙක්ට කණ්ඩ බොණ්ඩ බෑ
අපිට සර් 5000 දෙනවා කියලා කිව්වා. ඉතින් මෙතන උදේ 6 ඉඳන් මිනිස්සු එක්රෙක්ස් වෙලා ඉන්නවා. දැන් අපි අතුරට ගියාම කියනවා 5000 දෙන්න ගේ මූලිකයට විතරයි කියලා. එතකොට අනිත් අය මොනවද කන්නේ? මිනිස්සු හැමෝටම එන්න කියනවා. එන්න කිව්වට පස්සේ විතර මිනිස්සු ගාලා එලවනවා. පස්සේ අපි කන්නේ එතකොට අර ඒ සල්ලි ඔක්කොම ග්‍රාම සේවකගේ තාක්කුවට එතකොට සල්ලි ටික.
අනුපවුල් තම විවාහ සාතික ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න කියලා. අපි විවාහ සාතිකයක් ගෙනාවා. ගෙනාව පස්සේ කියනවා අපිට නෑ කියන එක පවුලට එකයිලු දෙන්නේ.
නමුත් අද වෙනකොට අපිට දෙන්න පුළුවන්කම තියෙන රුපියල් 5000 නිසා අපි ඒක ඉක්මනින් දෙනවා බඩුවල මේගොල්ලන්ට ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා. අපි දැනට ඒ කියන්නේ වියලි ආහාර ලබා ගන්න ක්‍රමත් ලෑස්ති කරලා තියෙනවා. ආර්ථික මධ්‍යස්ථාන. සියලුම අනුපවුල් වලටත් ලැබෙනවා ප්‍රධාන පවුල් වලටත් ලැබෙනවා.
With the onset of the COVID-19 outbreak, scientists the world over began their work to invent a vaccine for the virus. American and German developers Pfizer and BioNTech announced yesterday that a vaccine has been produced. A preliminary analysis has showed that this is the first coronavirus vaccine that can prevent more than 90% of people from getting COVID-19. Although hundreds of vaccines were produced to combat the virus, only a dozen of them are in the final stages of testing. Although a vaccine produced by the Oxford University was widely discussed in the past, this new vaccine produced by American and German developers Pfizer and BioNTech is the first vaccine to show any results. Their vaccine has been tested on 43,500 people in 6 countries and no safety concerns have been raised. The companies plan to apply for emergency approval to use the vaccine by the end of the month. The American developer Pfizer announced that they hope to produce 50 million vials of the vaccine by the end of this year and 1.3 billion vials by the end of 2021. Meanwhile, in Sri Lanka, the Ministry of Health announced yesterday that a decision has been reached to vaccinate 20% of the population in Sri Lanka. However, it remains unclear as to which vaccine will be used for this purpose.
If the vaccine produced by the Oxford University is accepted, the contract to produce the vaccine has been given to an Indian company. If they produce it, we will get 20% of it always. If we join the list of countries later, it will take us longer to receive the vaccine. So I think it is a good decision that was taken by the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health reached a consensus with the World Health Organization and have made plans to vaccinate 20% of the population. We found out yesterday that a technical committee has been appointed for this. We received information that they are attempting to bring this down from India. But even India has not announced yet that they have successfully produced a vaccine. How can a vaccine that has not been approved be given to 20% of the population in Sri Lanka? This is a serious issue. We know that some developed countries who cannot test vaccines in their countries had tested it on the populations in Africa. We are also aware of the complications the people in Africa had to face because of these tests. Therefore, it is the duty of this government as well as the health sectors to prevent the population of our country from facing a similar situation. The people of our country cannot be used as guinea pigs to test these vaccines. Do you understand? A portion of the population of the country cannot be used to test this vaccine. These vaccines must be first tested, and after they are approved, then they can be given to the people of this country. We are strongly against Sri Lanka being used as a test ground for vaccines produced by international companies.
ටෙස්ටිං ග්‍රවුන්ඩ් එකක් හැටියට ශ්‍රී ලංකාව පාවිච්චි කරනවට අපි තරයෙන් විරුද්ධයි.
The public transport service is facing a crisis owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. What about the bus fare? The government authorities commented on the matter.
A decision has been reached to waive and release delay charges, tender charges, logbook charges, access permit charges, permit updating charges and temporary permit charges from the passenger transport bus owners as a relief measure. We do not increase bus fares as a policy. However, we do have to allow them to charge an additional amount for the inconveniences experienced during operations. We have introduced 3 methods to the health sector. We are operating as per their instructions. If the passengers are allowed to follow the usual health guidelines and travel without restricting to a number, they can charge the usual price. The second method is restricting the number of passengers to the number of seats available. The current bus fare is 12 rupees. Based on the second method, the buses will charge 14 rupees. According to the third method, passengers will travel on a 50% capacity. In this case, passengers will have to purchase 1.5 tickets. We have made arrangements to increase the price of super luxury and luxury bus tickets to 1.5 and 1.2 respectively. The price of 1.1 tickets will be charged for semi-luxury buses. We will also establish a QR code method to record data of passengers. If not, you can fill a form and add your details to the system. Temperatures will be checked when entering air-conditioned buses.
Tonight, we filed a report regarding a possible vaccine for the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the viability of this vaccine is still a question that begs to be answered. In the meantime, controversy has arisen over the import of antigen test kits to Sri Lanka. This is a report filed on that matter.
Various views are being expressed over the importation of antigen test kits to identify individuals infected by COVID-19 in the country. A controversy had arisen after a private company had imported 200,000 antigen test kits, while the Health Ministry had invited bids to make the purchase. The management of the private company today responded to the allegations that the test kits had been imported in violation of health laws and without following the due procedure.
සිංහලෙන් කියනවා අර මගුලක් කතා කරනවා කියලා කියන වගේ එකක් තමයි මට කියන්න තියෙන්නේ. දැන් මේක
I wish to say that they are talking nonsense. The kits were imported with the intervention of a private company upon the request of the private sector. The government is not associated with this. They are trying to portray this as a state instruction by incorporating the government and the president. George Stewart Group of companies is 185 years old. The annual revenue of the group stands at around 5 or 6 billion. Some are trying to sling mud at us by associating a business activity of the company with something irrelevant.
අර ජරාජීර්ණ වූ දේශපාලන මඩක් මේකට ගැට ගහන්න බලාගෙන.
September 22 තමයි ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය.
The World Health Organization had accepted this test on the 22nd of September. The company in question had obtained permission from the National Medicines Regulatory Authority on the 22nd of October. They received approval to import the test kits within a week, that is on the 29th of October. The approval had been given under one condition. The company was informed that the Health Ministry has not issued the validation report for this test and that the process had not been completed. However, the test kits were imported to the country. Although the evaluation of the product had not been completed, this company is now claiming that it was not imported for the government but for the private sector. They are creating a story to that effect. However, I cannot comprehend the urgency behind importing them. If the private sector is supposed to import this, why did they call for tenders? The companies named SJ Biosensor and Dinasa Private Limited had submitted bids. We have learned that Dinasa Private Limited is a subsidiary of the George Stewart Group of companies. On-board diagnostics is also to be carried out by the George Stewart Company. The rules do not differ for the private sector. What is meant by validation? That includes how the product can be used, although it is good. It is the Health Ministry that can issue guidelines over this. The guidelines on using these test kits must be issued under this process. That has not been completed yet.
මේ ටෙස්ට් කිට් එක පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒක තාම ඉවර නැහැ.
The antigen test kits that are to be used in the detection of COVID-19 patients falls under the category of medical devices. The approval of the National Medicines Regulatory Authority is required to import the product regardless of whether it involves the private or government sector. On the 22nd of October, the National Medicines Regulatory Authority had granted George Stewart Group of companies a license that is valid for a year. Based on the legal framework of the country, the National Medicines Regulatory Authority has issued clear guidelines on the importation of medical devices. According to these guidelines, it will require at least 2 years to obtain the license. Based on the NMRA's guidelines to import medical devices, samples must be imported first using the license for the registration of the product. The samples then must be subject to an evaluation. Following the initial evaluation, the kits must be referred to an external evaluation committee whose report would be studied extensively before being subject to another evaluation. The final approval to import the product will be given upon successfully completing the process. However, according to the National Medicines Regulatory Authority, permission to import the antigen test kits had been granted based on the recommendations of the World Health Organization.
The World Health Organization has published an emergency use list indicating the products with their brand names. We issued recommendations that there is a possibility that they can be used. There were 2 types of antigen test kits on the emergency use list. One company had come forward as a local importer to import both these products. When any company seeks approval from us for registration, it is our authority that would grant permission. It was one company that had sought permission to import both products. If laboratory tests have been carried out and the results of those tests have shown that the product can be used, or if it is widely accepted globally, there is no need to import samples after obtaining the registration license from the National Medicines Regulatory Authority. A pharmaceutical drug or a medical device can be used in the country if it is recommended by the NMRA. However, the government is supposed to introduce a mechanism regarding the implementation of the product. We saw that certain regulations were introduced when the private sector was allowed to conduct PCR tests. The National Medicines Regulatory Authority can only authorize the usage of the product. The NMRA should be responsible for this. There is no method under which a device can be imported simply based on the decision of the World Health Organization. A validation test is being carried out on the samples of these test kits. However, there is a problem regarding the time frame during which the product was imported. A sample cannot be imported without the license of the MRA. Therefore, do not try to conceal the true story of the situation. Do not conceal the facts and try to deceive the public while wasting the hard-earned money of the people. Mahinda Rajapaksa was unseated from his post as president on the 8th of January 2015 because he favoured his allies. If this situation is recurring, then our efforts during the previous presidential election have failed. I oppose business activities that are carried out under the aegis of political influence. Politics and business are 2 different matters. I have professionally supported certain presidents. Although we have been directly involved in their victory, we have never asked for political favours from them. When Mahinda Rajapaksa contested the presidential election in 2005, I directly supported his campaign called A New Sri Lanka. I have never approached him for any form of favour. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is a friend of mine. In my career, I have never used personal friendships to carry out business activities. I don't hope to do that in the future as well.
Can a private company import products to Sri Lanka without a scientific study being carried out into them? If these products were imported in such a manner, isn't it a major offence? Won't those who imported the product be arrested? They are using the COVID-19 pandemic to carry out a racket. Several individuals are feeding off of this. They are the ones who are involved in these rackets. Mahinda Rajapaksa fell into trouble due to his power. It was the Buddhist monks who saved him from ending up in prison. However, this time around, their allies are also conducting a grave offence. The private sector is taking decisions while the president is acting as a spectator. Isn't there a connection between the health ministry and the president? Does this mean that the private sector is responsible for the people's lives in this country? Aren't state authorities responsible? If a person dies as a result of carrying out this test, the government will be held responsible for that. We wish to tell the people that we hope to file legal action against these activities in the future.
අපි බලාපොරොත්තු නැහැ කියන එක මේ රටේ මහ ජනතාව කියන්න කැමතියි.
State Minister Professor Channa Jayasumana is saying that the World Health Organization has pledged to provide 500,000 rapid antigen test kits. He said that 50,000 test kits will arrive in the country on the 7th. The country had already received 50,000 test kits. This batch was donated by the World Health Organization to the ministry recently. At the same time, another batch of 150,000 test kits imported from the Netherlands is also lying at the port due to some technical delays involved in harmonizing systems or HS codes. They are not being cleared or used. When we take the 500,000 test kits that are to be given by the World Health Organization into account, we will have 650,000 test kits. The President has said that his word is considered to be a circular. If there is a problem with the HS code amid the COVID-19 pandemic, why can't he issue the verbal circular to clear the stocks? Why is a private company acting hurriedly over this?
Meanwhile, the validation process conducted on the COVID-19 antigen test kits concluded today. When Newsfirst inquired on the matter by the Deputy Director General of Laboratory Services, Dr. Saman Ratnayaka, he said that guidelines on how to use the test kits will be issued upon completion of the validation process. The Deputy Director added that he is not aware of who imported the test kits into the country.
We received these test kits from the World Health Organization. We did not check who imported these samples. What we checked were the Abbott and biotech samples. Those two samples were recognized today as samples that could be used by Sri Lankans.
Meanwhile, views were expressed about the reopening of schools as well.
We are hoping to reopen schools in another week or so. If a school student contracts the virus, that student is not at fault. That student's family could have transmitted the virus, either the school van or the three-wheeler that they were travelling in.
A new quarantine centre was declared open in Modara today for police officers undergoing quarantine. The quarantine centre was declared open by senior DIG in charge of the Western Province, Deshabanda Thennakon.
The police officers who contracted COVID-19 are recovering fast. 27 officers recovered today. Police officers who maintain close contacts with the officers who tested positive for COVID-19 have been quarantined at 3 quarantine centres with all the required facilities in Colombo Central, Colombo North and the South. We have prepared 150 beds at these centres.
305 new COVID-19 cases were reported in the country today. 5 more COVID-19 deaths were also reported during the day thus far. This brought the total number of COVID-19 related deaths in Sri Lanka to 41.
Among the deaths reported today was a 51-year-old male who was a resident at a home from the elderly in Rajagiriya. The cause of the death was ruled as COVID-19 related pneumonia. A 45-year-old male from Colombo 10 died of COVID-19 related to respiratory infection. A 63-year-old woman from Udugampala Gampaha died from COVID-19 related pneumonia. A 48-year-old resident from Ragama was reported to be dead at his residence this evening as well. The 5th person who succumbed to the virus today has not been identified as yet. According to the notice issued by the Government Information Department, the deceased has been identified as a male aged between 55 and 60. On a more positive note, 657 COVID-19 patients recovered from the virus today. With that, the total COVID-19 recoveries in the country increased to 9,537. 4,712 patients are currently receiving treatment for the virus under medical supervision. The total number of COVID-19 patients in the country have risen to 14,285.
Close to 50% of deaths have been reported inside houses as a result of the constant requests that we made in the past few days from the Ministry of Health to have a review committee to study this matter. The Director General of Health had appointed that review committee yesterday. We see this as a positive act.
Now, from the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic in Sri Lanka, there was a public debate on how the final rites of victims of COVID-19 should be conducted. Minister of Justice, President's Counsel Ali Sabry recently spoke on this matter.
90% of the telephone calls I receive are requests to bury Muslims who die of COVID-19 instead of cremating them. I think it's a fair request. I'm holding discussions about this as much as I can. Some are waiting to obtain political advantages out of this. Some are waiting to label us as extremists when Muslims have presented a genuine issue they face. 189 countries in the world have given both options of cremation and burial. Even the World Health Organization has given the option of burying a person. We have made a request to scientifically test this and consider all possibilities to carry out burials while being extra cautious about the health guidelines and spread of the virus. But it does not mean that we are challenging the law of the country. It does not mean that the Muslims are given special treatment. What we are simply asking is to consider if there is any possibility to check if this procedure that is carried out by many countries including India can be done based on all World Health Organization guidelines. I hope the authorities will look into this and sympathetically consider this request and make arrangements.
Meanwhile, a district coordinating committee meeting was convened today regarding the COVID-19 situation in the Colombo district. Several representatives of the ruling and opposition parties were present.
We have provided a hamper worth 10,000 rupees to 9,033 families. The pending hampers are for 130 other families we have identified during the last 2 days. Arrangements to provide these to the families in need as soon as we identify them are underway. What is the criteria taken into consideration before the allowance of 5,000 rupees is provided and how have they been implemented? According to the reports compiled initially, 435,000 people were identified in the Colombo district who were in need of this allowance. There were a number of people who had submitted appeals as well. In addition, instructions have been given to the Divisional Secretary to authorize the provision of the allowance to families identified through the village committees.
The public representatives expressed their views to the media.
At a time like this, we are requesting the government to not consider the opposition party as its enemy or vice versa. The real enemy here is COVID. Therefore, we should put our political disagreements aside and work towards the betterment of the general public. The problem related to rice will be solved in a couple of days. The Prime Minister has an order at the Cabinet to release the Nadu rice held by all district secretaries to the market. There are several shortcomings regarding the relief given to the public. The government should work on providing solutions to these as soon as possible, especially in terms of the economy and improving the standard of living of the community. The government has bigger responsibilities to look into.
Mavanala Pradesha Sabha, located at the Mavanala Police Division, which has been isolated due to COVID-19, convened today. 15 minutes after the Pradesha Sabha was convened, Mavanala Police OIC arrived at the location and handed over an interim order issued by the court preventing the Mavanala Pradesha Sabha from convening for 7 days to its chairman. Government and opposition members of the Pradesha Sabha opposed the order. Afterward, government and opposition members of the Pradesha Sabha arrived at the police station and met with the OIC.
The prices of essential food items are, of course, an important factor for the people in the country, especially given the COVID-19 outbreak and the financial constraints that it has placed on the community at large. The Consumer Affairs Authority has issued an extraordinary gazette fixing the price of a kilo of white sugar with effect from today. A kilogram of packaged white sugar will be sold at 90 rupees and a kilogram of bulk white sugar will be sold at 85 rupees. The wholesale price of a kilogram of white sugar has been fixed at 80 rupees. The gazette was issued by the Consumer Affairs Authority Chairman, retired Major General Shanta Dissanayaka. Moving on in more local news, residents of Mavilaru Selunura in Kantale revealed details of the destruction caused at an ecologically sensitive area in the vicinity.
Area residents allege that an area of about 20 acres of land in Maval Aru, Serunuvara in Kantale is being destroyed. According to the residents, this destruction began about a week ago. They point out that this plot of land was used by the residents of Mavil Aru for farming purposes. However, this area was declared as an ecologically sensitive area in 2014 and included farmland of people in the area as well. According to the residents of the ecologically sensitive area in Mavilaru is under the control of members of the Civil Defence Force.
We told you the true story. After the war ended in 2010, the Civil Defence Force was given this plot of land for farming purposes. We did not have any land. We spoke to the divisional secretaries and got these plots of land. People use these lands for farming before the time you speak of. Some of their homes are located here.
Do not tell me that it wasn't taken. I suffered a lot to get my share. You know that the people here are innocent. No one is coming forward for this. They are all members of the Civil Defence Force.
Those are lands that members of this farmers association were cultivating on for 38 years. If our people plant so much as a bush on that land, officials of the Forest Conservation Department would file action against us in court. That law doesn't apply to these people.
The Divisional Secretary of the Serunuvara has been informed by the area residents to take action against this.
We have been informed that the divisional secretary here in 2010 had given permission to them to cultivate on this land during the 2010-2011 Maha season, but only for that season. That is as far as I know. Now it is a land that belongs to the Forest Conservation Department.
These farmers request for their farmland to be returned back to them. We inquired on this matter from the Director General of the Civil Defence Force. He said that according to an announcement made by the government, 50 acres of land have been handed over for farming purposes. These were the views expressed by the Minister of Land, S.M. Chandrasena.
I have not received information regarding that. The Civil Defence Force cannot clear forests like that. If the land belongs to the Department of Forest Conservation, permission must be sought from them. If this belongs to the Department of Wildlife, then they will definitely not be able to use the land. If the lands are under the Ministry of Land, then they must seek the permission of the ministry.
Meanwhile, a circular issued previously regarding the state forests was withdrawn, vesting the control of these other state forests in the hands of divisional and district secretaries.
These other state forest lands were land that were previously used for cultivation by our farmers. That is not a special circular. We took a decision as the Cabinet of Ministers to give back the lands of our farmers who have been cultivating on them for a long period of time. We have not taken over any forest land from the Department of Wildlife Conservation or the Department of Forest Conservation through a circular or a cabinet decision. It was from this circular that 500,000 hectares or approximately 13 million acres of forests were conserved. On the 4th of this month, the Secretary to the Ministry of Wildlife and Forest Conservation issued this circular abolishing the 5/2001 circular. Most of the catchment areas are located in this other forest land. More than 30,000 hectares of forest lands are located in the Central Hill area. These are the ecosystems that are located in the heart of the country.
හෙක්ටයාර් 30000ක් විතර තියෙනවා. මේ රටේ හදවත. මේ හදවත ඇතුළේ තියෙන වනාන්තර පද්ධතීන් මේ.
ඇත්තටම මේ චක්‍රලේඛය හරහා මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ මේ ගොවි ජනතාවට?
What is actually happening through this circular? Are they actually letting the farming community carry out their cultivations? This government came into power by accusing the previous government of attempting to sign the MCC compact. But if you really think of it, is this the first step of the large land grab plan that MCC is expecting to carry out throughout the country? That we have to ask this government.
ඒක අහන්න වෙනවා මේ ආණ්ඩුවේ.
Joining us tonight with the weather forecast is News First's Azra Hassan.
Good evening, you're with me, Azra Hassan, joining you from the Weather Center. Yesterday, northern and the eastern provinces experienced heavy rainfall. The Mullaitivu district alone experienced rainfall exceeding 350 millimeters. Sri Lanka is currently experiencing the second intermonsoon. Now, during the intermonsoonal period from October to November, Sri Lanka usually experiences heavy rainfall. What is the situation for tonight? The Met Department says that showers exceeding 100 millimeters can be expected from the north, north central, western, central and the southern provinces, and also from districts like Trincomalee and Anuradhapura. Now, the Met Department says that strong winds can also be experienced during this prevailing weather condition. Due to the prevailing rainy weather condition in the country, several areas in the Mullaitivu district were inundated yesterday.
The Pathfinder Foundation has organized a conference on Indian Ocean security. The inaugural session was held today and the conference will be conducted online for 3 days.
The session was attended by the Sri Lanka Foreign Secretary Professor Jayanath Colambage and the US and Japanese ambassadors to Sri Lanka, along with former Ambassador Geeta De Silva. Former National Security Advisor of India Shiv Shankar Menon and Chairman of the Pathfinder Foundation Bernard Gunatilaka were the co-chairs of the conference.
Today we see the re-emergence of Quad, the four pillar countries, India, Japan, America and Australia is. But will the Quad lead to a maritime cool war? I don't want to use the Cold War. It may not be as cold as the Cold War is a question. And we do see insecurity of some countries leading to insecurity of other countries across the Indian Ocean. Now, therefore, the Indian Ocean is rapidly characterized by increasing arms dynamic. We have a huge mistrust and trust deficiency in the Indian Ocean. We don't want to be caught up in the major power game. We don't want to hedge between countries. We don't want to choose between countries. We don't want to bandwagon with one against the other. Investment is very welcome. We don't want to be a strategic security concern to India.
The United States has a goal in this region, and that is to support a free and open space in which sovereign and independent nations and diverse cultures can prosper side by side. As Secretary Pompeo said during his recent visit to Sri Lanka, this is not a vision that is about imposing America's will on Sri Lanka or any other partner in the region. In fact, it's quite the opposite. As a friend and partner, the United States seeks to promote an inclusive approach to national sovereignty, independence, and sustainable development. This is a call to rally around principles rather than a request to make an alliance. We're also committed to expanding private sector participation as an alternative to state-dominated financing that impinges on national sovereignty and local autonomy, that saddles economies with debilitating debt and encourages corrupt practices.
Based on the agreed framework, Japan and Sri Lanka have made steady progress in the area of maritime cooperation. On the maritime safety and security, to begin with, Japan has extended assistance to Sri Lanka by first, granting the 2 new patrol vessels to Sri Lanka Coast Guard. Second, extending technical assistance for improving oil spill management to Sri Lanka Coast Guard in view that Sri Lanka faces heavy traffic of oil tankers off the coast every day. And the third, supporting VVSS, Visit, Board, Search and Seizure training courses conducted by Global Maritime Crime Programs of UNODC, closely supported by Sri Lankan Navy, to tackle the mounting challenge of illegal drug trafficking plaguing the regions, among others.
And now in a look at some news from overseas, President of the United States Donald Trump has fired his Defense Secretary Mark Esper in one of the latest signs that the transition to a new Biden administration in January is going to be turbulent on both the domestic and foreign fronts.
Esper was fired by a tweet with the former president declaring he was, quote, pleased to announce that Christopher C. Miller, the highly respected director of the National Counterterrorism Center, will be acting Secretary of Defense effective immediately, end quote. In a calmly worded final letter to the former president, Esper wrote, quote, I serve the country in deference to the Constitution, so I accept your decision to replace me, end quote. He left the Pentagon quietly today without the clap-out from staff members traditionally accorded to a departing secretary. Miller arrived at the Pentagon today amid questions about the legality of his appointment. By the law, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, currently David Norquist, would become the acting secretary in the event of the sudden departure at the top. Furthermore, the law requires that a Secretary of Defense to have been out of the active duty military service for 7 years. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump's spokeswoman has vowed the legal battle to contest Joe Biden's White House election victory is only just the beginning. She made a flurry of allegations of election corruption, although no evidence of systematic fraud that might have influenced the result has emerged. In line with this, US Attorney General William Barr has allowed prosecutors to probe alleged irregularities in the presidential election, prompting a senior Justice Department official to quit. In such cases would normally be the remit of individual statuses, but Barr said this was not a hard and fast rule. Donald Trump refuses to accept Joe Biden's projected victory and has made unsubstantiated fraud claims. The president's campaign is seeking an emergency injunction in Pennsylvania to prevent Biden's victory being certified in the state. Since media projected on Saturday that Joe Biden had won the critical state of Pennsylvania, accumulating enough votes to claim the White House, the president-elect has forged ahead with his plans to take reins of the power. The General Services Administration, which manages federal agencies, has held off on allowing Biden aides to formally begin the transition, saying no ascertainment on an election winner had yet been made.
The grand finale of this year's Indian Premier League is currently underway at the Dubai International Stadium. Playing in the finals are the Mumbai Indians and the Delhi Capitals. Delhi Capitals won the toss and elected to bowl first. This year's finalist Mumbai Indians have won 4 seasons of the Indian Premier League. This is the first time the Delhi Capitals have advanced to the finals of this tournament. Shreyas Iyer is the captain of the Delhi Capitals and Rohit Sharma leads the Mumbai Indians.
He's got another one, he's burgled it down the leg side. That is himself at the end, so they would need... That's bowled him. Right, who are we to question Rohit Sharma? That is the question that you're... Shot! Sure the game so far. And that is...
Currently, Mumbai Indians are 29 runs for no loss.
Might have got enough of this. Yeah.
Mahela Jayaruwan is the head coach of the Mumbai Indians team.
Should be a run out, is run out. Very good pick-up for trying to come back for 2. But...
And that's a wrap of primetime news on TV1 for tonight. Of course, before we leave you, we must remind you to keep staying tuned to Newsfirst on TV1, because right after the news, Attorney at Law Sonali Vaniga Baduge speaks with Deshamanya Bradman Tennakon, a civil servant here in Sri Lanka who has performed a yeoman service to his country. Stay tuned for that. Until next time, I'm Charlotte Benedict with our sign language interpreter for tonight, Brian De Cruz. Take care and God bless.